Jacob Valdez was elbow-deep in a malfunctioning atmospheric processor when his life decided to get complicated again. The diagnostic scanner beeped cheerfully as it informed him that the oxygen recycler was, in technical terms, completely screwed. He wiped grease from his hands and muttered a few choice words that would have made his grandmother reach for her wooden spoon. "Another thrilling day in paradise," he said to the empty maintenance bay, his voice echoing off the metal walls. Outside the reinforced windows, Kepler 442c's twin suns cast harsh shadows across the crystalline formations that gave this moon its distinctive purple shimmer. Most people found the landscape beautiful. Jacob found it a convenient place to hide from his past. The communication panel crackled to life. "Jacob, you copy. We've got another water pump acting up in Sector 7. The voice belonged to Maria Santos, the colony's administrator and one of the few people who actually seemed to enjoy living on this rock. "Copy, Maria. Let me guess. It's making that grinding noise again." "Like a dying space whale, yeah. Think you can work your magic?" Jacob glanced at the atmospheric processor, then at the growing list of repair requests on his tablet. Life on a frontier moon meant everything broke constantly, and somehow he'd become the guy who fixed it all. "I'll be there in an hour. Try not to let anyone die of thirst before then. You're all heart, Valdez." He was halfway to the door when the early warning system decided to ruin his day. The alert tone wasn't the usual lazy beep that announced supply ships or the occasional tourist vessel. This was the urgent, attention-grabbing wail reserved for unscheduled arrivals. Jacob froze, his hand on the door controls. The main display flickered to life, showing 6 contacts dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Jacob's blood turned to ice water as he recognized the distinctive hull configurations. Those weren't Earth Colonial Authority ships with their boxy, utilitarian designs. These vessels flowed like liquid mercury, their biometallic hulls gleaming with an otherworldly sheen that could only mean one thing: Zephyrian military. "Well, shit," Jacob said, which pretty much summed up his feelings about unexpected visits from his ex-wife's people. He stumbled to his observation deck, hands shaking as he activated the long-range telescope. The image resolved slowly, and Jacob's worst fears crystallized into high-definition reality. The lead ship bore the flowing script of Lyrian text along its hull, and the command structure was one he'd memorized during sleepless nights years ago. His ex-wife had found him. The communication system erupted with panic chatter from the various settlements scattered across the moon's surface. Maria's voice cut through the noise. "Jacob, please tell me you know something about these ships. My threat assessment computer just had what I can only describe as a nervous breakdown." Jacob keyed his microphone with a trembling finger. "They're Zephyrian, Lyrian military specifically." "Since when do you know Zephyrian ship classifications?" Since he'd been married to one of them, but that particular detail had never made it into his personnel file. "Lucky guess. I'd recommend everyone stays calm and doesn't do anything that might be interpreted as hostile." "Like what?" "Like breathing too loudly." The first shuttle launched from the command vessel, its trajectory aimed directly at Jacob's engineering station. Of course it was. He'd been a fool to think he could hide forever on this forgotten chunk of rock, fixing water pumps, and pretending his biggest problem was synthetic coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Jacob rushed to his personal quarters and grabbed the emergency bag he'd kept packed for 3 years. Clothes, credits, identification papers under various names, and a bottle of genuine Earth whiskey for really bad days. Today qualified. The shuttle's approach was flawless, the kind of precision flying that Zephyrian pilots made look effortless. Jacob watched through his window as the craft settled onto his landing pad with barely a whisper of displaced air. The hull was unmarked except for a small symbol he recognized: the intertwined infinity loops of the Lyrian Scientific Council. His heart did something complicated and painful in his chest. The shuttle's ramp extended with hydraulic grace, and figures in adaptive camouflage began emerging. Their armor rippled like liquid mercury, adjusting its pattern to match the purple-tinted landscape. 12 soldiers, by his count, moving with the coordinated precision of a unit that had worked together for years. Jakob activated his station's external speakers and tried for casual indifference. "Welcome to Kepler 442c, population boring. I'm afraid we're all booked up at the moment, so you'll have to find accommodations elsewhere." One of the soldiers looked up at his window and made a gesture that universal translators probably wouldn't have appreciated. Jakob grinned despite himself. At least some things never changed. The last figure to emerge from the shuttle made his breath catch in his throat. Even in full tactical gear, he'd have recognized that silhouette anywhere. The way she moved, the tilt of her head, the pointed ears that poked through the gaps in her helmet, features that had once been as familiar to him as his own reflection. Zara. She looked up at his window and removed her helmet, revealing features that were startlingly human, except for those distinctive ears. Her hair was shorter now, cropped in a military style that somehow made her even more beautiful. 3 years had been kind to her. "Hello, Jakob," she said, her voice carrying easily through the external speakers. "Permission to come aboard?" "That depends. Are you planning to arrest me, kill me, or just make my life significantly more complicated?" Her laugh was exactly as he remembered it, warm and genuine with just a hint of mischief. "Would it matter if I said I was just here for a friendly visit? Considering you brought 12 heavily armed friends, I'm guessing this isn't a social call." "You always were perceptive." Jakob sighed and activated the airlock controls. "Come on up then. Fair warning, the coffee is terrible and the conversation isn't much better." The soldiers established a perimeter around his station with military efficiency, while Zara made her way to the main airlock. Jakob tried to prepare himself for seeing her again, but 3 years of carefully constructed emotional walls crumbled the moment she stepped through the door. She'd changed. The gentle scientist he'd married had been replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. The tactical gear suited her in a way her lab coats never had, and there was an authority in her bearing that hadn't been there before. Command, he realized, she'd been promoted. "You look good," she said, glancing around his modest quarters. "Domestic life suits you. If by domestic you mean slowly going insane from boredom, then yes, I'm absolutely thriving." He gestured at his workspace, where half-dismantled equipment competed for space with technical manuals. "As you can see, I'm living the dream. Still fixing things that break, I see. Seems to be my specialty." The words came out more bitter than he'd intended. Zara's expression softened slightly. "Jakob, I need to talk to you about something important. Let me guess, you're here about the relay." The shock on her face was answer enough. "You knew I'd come." "I knew someone would, eventually. I just hoped it wouldn't be you." She stepped closer, and he caught a familiar scent beneath the tactical gear's chemical smell, something floral and alien that had once made him dizzy with longing. "I need that relay, Jakob. My people's lives depend on it. And what about the lives of everyone on this moon? Because that relay isn't exactly what you'd call safe to activate." "I know," her voice was barely a whisper. "But I don't have a choice." Jakob looked into her eyes, still the same deep violet that had first captivated him at a xenobiology conference, what felt like a lifetime ago, and realized with sinking certainty that his quiet life was about to become very loud indeed. The tension in Jakob's quarters could have been cut with a plasma cutter. Zara stood near his workbench, her fingers tracing the edge of a half-repaired hydroponics controller, while he tried to pretend his heart wasn't attempting to escape through his throat. "Nice digs," she said, gesturing at the cramped space that served as his home, office, and workshop. "Very minimalist. I prefer the term aggressively practical. Besides, you should see my neighbor's place. It's just a hole in the ground with a tarp over it." Jakob moved to his tiny kitchenette, desperate for something to do with his hands. "Coffee. It tastes like industrial solvent, but it's caffeinated industrial solvent. I'll pass, thanks. I remember your coffee standards. Hey, my coffee was perfectly adequate. Jakob, your idea of good coffee was anything that didn't actually kill you on the first sip. He couldn't help but smile at that. 3 years and she still remembered his culinary shortcomings with painful accuracy. So, Commander. He emphasized the rank, noting how her shoulders straightened reflexively. Congratulations on the promotion, by the way. I assume it came with the usual benefits package. Bigger gun, more people to boss around, increased likelihood of violent death. Something like that. She moved away from the workbench, her tactical boots silent on the metal flooring. The Lyrian Council decided I was too valuable to waste in a laboratory. Must have been quite a career change. From let's study interesting alien microbes to let's point weapons at things. The microbes turned out to be more politically significant than anyone expected. Her tone carried an edge that hadn't been there in their marriage. Apparently, proving that Earth's colonial expansion was built on genocide tends to make people nervous. Jakob's hand froze halfway to the coffee dispenser. Wait, what? The relay, Jakob. The one you helped me build. It contains proof that Earth Command manufactured the Arcturus Station massacre. My people didn't attack those civilians. Earth's Black Ops Division did, then blamed us to justify the war. The coffee maker gurgled ominously, which seemed appropriate given the circumstances. That's a pretty serious accusation, Zara. It's not an accusation when you have evidence. She activated a holographic projector from her wrist unit, and the air shimmered with classified military documents. Archived communications, operational orders, financial records, all stored in quantum encryption on that relay. Jakob stared at the floating text, his mind racing through the implications. If this is true, then why haven't you? Because the relay is buried under 50 meters of crystalline rock, on a moon that happens to be protected by automated planetary defense systems that will incinerate anything that tries to access classified Earth military data. She deactivated the projector with a sharp gesture. Systems that you helped install, as I recall. That was different. Those were supposed to protect civilian installations from. He stopped, realization hitting him like a shuttle to the face. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. What? The defense grid. It's not just protecting the settlements from external threats. It's protecting Earth secrets from people like you. Jakob slumped against his counter, suddenly feeling very old. I helped build a system to keep you from proving your people's innocence. The irony wasn't lost on me either. A soft chime echoed through the station, followed by Maria's voice over the intercom. Jakob, we've got a situation down here. These, visitors of yours have set up some kind of excavation equipment in Sector 12. Should I be concerned? Jakob keyed the response channel. Define concerned, Maria. Well, they've got what looks like a small mining operation going, complete with heavy machinery and enough firepower to level a city block. Also, one of them asked me about soil density readings, which struck me as oddly specific for tourists. Jakob looked at Zara, who had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed. You brought mining equipment. We prefer geological extraction apparatus. Right, and I suppose the heavily armed soldiers are just here for the scenic views. Security consultants. Of course they are. Jakob rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. Maria, tell your new friends that they're welcome to dig all they want, but if they hit a power conduit, they're paying for the repairs. Copy that, though I should probably mention that their excavation site is directly over the old comm relay you installed 3 years ago. Jakob's blood ran cold. Did you tell them that? I figured they already knew, considering they've got blueprints of the entire underground layout. Blueprints? Jakob turned to stare at Zara. How exactly did you get? You always were terrible at data security, she said with a slight smile. Remember that night you fell asleep at your terminal after working on the installation specs. You copied my files while I was unconscious. You were snoring. It seemed rude to wake you. She moved closer and he caught that familiar scent again. Besides, you left your password as Zara 123, not exactly military-grade encryption. That was my backup password. But your primary was Zara 456. Jakob opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. She had a point. Okay, fine, my operational security was questionable. But stealing classified installation data from your husband's computer is still. Ex-husband, she corrected gently. The words hit him harder than they should have. Right, ex-husband. I keep forgetting we're not technically married anymore. But actually, Zara said, reaching into a pouch on her tactical vest. About that. She produced a data pad and handed it to him. Jakob's eyes widened as he read the legal document displayed on the screen. These are the divorce papers I never filed. They're marked as processing error, insufficient documentation. The Zephyrian legal system is very particular about paperwork. Jakob stared at her. Are you telling me we're still married? According to the legal systems of 3 different star systems, yes. She tried to look nonchalant, but he caught the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. I thought you should know, given the circumstances. What circumstances? Well, as my legal spouse, you're entitled to conjugal visitation rights, even during military operations. Jakob nearly dropped the data pad. You're not seriously suggesting. I'm just saying the regulations are very clear on the matter. Her smile was becoming more pronounced. Of course, such visits would require us to share quarters for the duration of my stay here. But, Zara, your stay here involves digging up a potentially world-ending piece of technology while surrounded by enough firepower to level a small city. This isn't exactly a romantic getaway. I've had worse honeymoons. But despite everything, the danger, the political implications, the fact that his quiet life was dissolving around him, Jakob found himself laughing. You know, most couples just argue about who takes out the trash. We get to debate whether to expose galactic conspiracies. It keeps things interesting. The intercom crackled again. Jakob, your wife, sorry, ex-wife, sorry, I'm honestly not sure what the correct term is here. Anyway, she wants to know if you can provide soil density readings for the excavation site. Jakob looked at Zara, who was trying very hard to look innocent. You need soil density readings. The relay's quantum core is extremely sensitive to environmental conditions. If the surrounding geology has shifted since installation, accessing it could trigger a cascade failure that would make your planetary defenses look like firecrackers. So you're telling me that attempting to activate this thing could not only trigger the automated defense systems, but also cause the relay itself to explode. But only if we're careless about it. And if you're not careless, then it'll just trigger the automated defense systems. Jakob stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing again. It wasn't entirely sane laughter, but given the circumstances, sanity seemed overrated. You know what? Sure, let's dig up the doomsday device. What could possibly go wrong? The excavation site looked like a geological surgery in progress. Zephyrian engineers moved with methodical precision around their bioluminescent drilling equipment, their tools carving through the moon's crystalline bedrock with surgical accuracy. Jakob stood at the crater's edge, watching layers of his past get peeled away meter by meter. Your friends work fast, he said to Zara, who was consulting a handheld scanner that pulsed with soft blue light. Lyrian mining technology is designed for efficiency. We've mapped the entire underground structure in the last 2 hours. She showed him the scanner's display, where a 3-dimensional image rotated slowly. The relay is intact, 37.5 meters down, exactly where you buried it. I didn't bury it. I carefully concealed it using accepted engineering practices. You threw dirt on it and hoped nobody would notice. Jakob winced. That's a gross oversimplification of a complex installation procedure. One of the engineers called out something in rapid Lyrian, their voice carrying the musical quality of their "You mean after our marriage became collateral damage in an interstellar political crisis? I mean after I was branded a traitor and had to flee Earth space with a bounty on my head." Her voice carried a weight he'd never heard before. The Lyrian Council didn't exactly welcome me with open arms. Marrying a human was considered problematic. Jakob felt something cold settle in his stomach. They blamed you for the war. They blamed me for a lot of things. Sharing classified research with Earth scientists, compromising security protocols, general treason, the usual. She managed a bitter smile. Turns out political marriages are unpopular on both sides of the conflict. But political marriage, the words came out sharper than he'd intended. Is that what we were? No, the answer was immediate and fierce. Never, but that's how they saw it after the shooting started. A soft chiming sound interrupted them as Jakob's communication unit activated. Maria's voice crackled through the speaker. "Jakob, we've got a problem. The defense grid's early warning system just went active. Something about unauthorized geological surveys." Jakob's blood turned to ice water. "Define active, Maria." "Well, the good news is we're not dead yet. The bad news is that every orbital platform in the system is now scanning for potential threats. The really bad news is that your wife's mining operation is lighting up their sensors like a Christmas tree." Zara was already moving, barking orders in Lyrian to her engineers. Jakob grabbed his emergency toolkit and started toward the excavation site. "Can you buy us some time? I can try routing the scan results through the regular geological survey protocols. Make it look like routine mineral exploration. That might fool the automated systems for a few hours." "Do it." Jakob cut the connection and caught up with Zara at the dig site. "How long before you can access the relay?" 2 hours minimum. The quantum core's shielding is more extensive than we anticipated. We don't have 2 hours. The defense grid's already suspicious. Then we work faster. She turned to her engineering team and issued rapid commands. The pace of excavation immediately intensified, bioluminescent drills boring deeper into the crystalline rock. Jakob pulled out his portable engineering scanner and started mapping the underground power conduits. "If I can reroute some of the colony's power grid, I might be able to mask your energy signature. Make it look like routine maintenance work." "You'd do that." "Zara, if those orbital platforms decide you're a threat, they'll sterilize this entire moon. That includes me, and I've grown rather attached to continuing to exist." Always the romantic. He was elbow-deep in a power junction when his scanner picked up something that made his heart skip. "Oh no, 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 no." "What is it?" "The relay's quantum core. It's not dormant. It's been running background processes for 3 years." Jakob's hands flew over his scanner controls, confirming readings he desperately hoped were wrong. "The power drain is minimal, but it's been slowly building up a charge in the transmission array." "What does that mean?" "It means your relay has been preparing to broadcast for 3 years. The moment you activate it, it won't just access archived data. It'll transmit everything it's been storing directly to every Zephyrian ship in range." Zara stared at him. "Everything?" "Colony defense protocols, civilian population data, resource surveys, communication logs. Basically everything the Earth Colonial Authority considers classified about this system." Jakob ran calculations in his head and didn't like the results. The defense grid won't just see this as unauthorized data access. It'll interpret it as active espionage. "How long do we have once the transmission starts?" "Based on the standard response protocols, maybe 30 seconds before every orbital platform in the system opens fire." One of the engineers called out excitedly, their bioluminescent tools illuminating something metallic in the depths of the excavation. The relay's outer casing was visible now, its quantum processors humming with barely contained energy. "There it is," Zara breathed. 3 years of searching, and there it is. Jakob looked at the device they'd built together during happier times, when their biggest concern was whether the quantum entanglement matrix would maintain coherence over interstellar distances. Now it represented a choice between exposing the truth and potentially starting a war. Zara, there's something else. He hesitated, knowing his next words would change everything. The relay doesn't just contain evidence about Arcturus Station. I stored our personal communications on it too. Every message, every research file, every late-night conversation we had while building this thing. Her eyes widened. You kept all of that. I couldn't bring myself to delete it. Our entire relationship is archived in that quantum core, along with the evidence that could clear your people. So if I activate the relay, everyone gets to know that Commander Zara of the Lyrian fleet was once married to a human systems engineer who thought Zara 123 was adequate password security. He managed a weak smile. Your military career might not survive the embarrassment. Jakob, there's more. The transmission will include my engineering logs from the defense grid installation. Earth Command will know I was involved in building something that could expose their war crimes. We'll both be fugitives. The excavation around them continued with mechanical precision, layers of rock falling away to reveal more of the relay's structure. Time was running out, and they both knew it. So, Jakob said, trying for levity despite the circumstances, any second thoughts about this reunion? Because I have to say, most couples just argue about whose turn it is to do the dishes. Zara laughed, though it sounded forced. You know, when I imagined finding you again, this wasn't quite how I pictured it going. Really? Because explosive political revelations and imminent death were pretty much exactly what I expected from any conversation with you. I love you too. The words hung in the air between them, carrying 3 years of separation and pain. Jakob felt his carefully constructed emotional walls crumble completely. This is insane, you know that, right? He said. We're about to risk everything on the chance that a 3-year-old piece of jury-rigged technology might prove your people didn't commit genocide. When you put it like that, it does sound rather optimistic. And if it works, we'll probably spend the rest of our lives running from both our governments. Together, though. Jakob looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the military commander who'd arrived with an armed escort, but the brilliant scientist who'd once fallen asleep at her workstation, because she was too excited about quantum mechanics to remember to sleep. Well, he said, I suppose there are worse ways to spend a marriage. The first rays of Kepler 442c's twin suns painted the excavation site in harsh double shadows, as Jakob made what he hoped wouldn't be the last decision of his life. The quantum relay stood fully exposed in the crater, its crystalline core pulsing with 3 years of accumulated energy, while overhead, orbital defense platforms had begun their targeting sweeps. Maria, he said into his communicator, I need you to broadcast an emergency evacuation order to all settlements. Tell everyone to get to the reinforced shelters and stay there until further notice. Jakob, what's going on? The orbital platforms are acting like we're under attack. We might be, just trust me on this one, okay? Copy, emergency broadcast going out now. There was a pause. For what it's worth, your coffee really was terrible. Despite everything, Jakob found himself smiling. Thanks, Maria. That's exactly what I needed to hear right now. He cut the connection and turned to Zara, who was running final diagnostics on the relay's transmission array. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency over the quantum interface, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. Status report, he asked. The relay's ready for activation. Transmission will begin 30 seconds after initialization and broadcast for approximately 2 minutes. She looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting the pre-dawn light. Once it starts, there's no stopping it. And the defense grid. According to my calculations, we'll have 27 seconds before the orbital platforms achieve target lock and open fire. Jakob did the math in his head and didn't like the answer. So we'll be 3 seconds short of a very dramatic death. Unless your modification to the power coupling works. He glanced at the jury-rigged bypass he'd spliced into the relay's power system, a desperate attempt to make the transmission appear like routine maintenance traffic rather than active espionage. It was the kind of quick fix that made his engineering professors weep, but it might just fool the automated systems long enough to matter. "You know," he said, "when I married you, I thought the most dangerous thing we'd ever do together would be your cooking." "My cooking was perfectly acceptable. Zara, you once set fire to water. I'm still not entirely sure how that's physically possible. It was a chemical reaction involving hydrogen-based compounds. You were making tea." She laughed, and for a moment, the years of separation and pain dissolved. They were just two people who'd found something worth risking everything for, even if they weren't entirely sure what that something was. The relay's activation sequence began with a soft chime that seemed absurdly cheerful given the circumstances. Jakob watched his makeshift bypass come online, routing the transmission through the colony's communication array and disguising it as routine data traffic. "Initialization complete," Zara announced. "Quantum entanglement matrix stable, beginning data extraction." High above them, Jakob's scanner detected the first warning pulses from the orbital defense platforms. The automated systems were suspicious but not yet hostile. His disguise was holding, barely. "First data packet transmitted," Zara said. "Archives from Arcturus Station, including communications logs showing Earth Command's Black Ops authorization for the civilian strike." Jakob's communicator crackled with excited chatter from various settlements as colonists reported strange signals in the communication bands. Maria's voice cut through the noise. "Jakob, I'm picking up some kind of massive data transmission. It's on every frequency simultaneously." "That's normal," he lied cheerfully. "Just routine maintenance." Routine maintenance doesn't usually include classified military documents about war crimes. Jakob winced. His communications officer was more observant than he'd hoped. "Maria, could you do me a favor and not mention that to anyone for, the next few years?" "Second data packet transmitted," Zara reported. "Evidence of manufactured intelligence reports used to justify the war declaration." The orbital platform's targeting systems were getting more aggressive. Jakob watched his scanner as multiple weapon systems achieved preliminary lock on the excavation site. His disguise wouldn't hold much longer. "Third packet," Zara continued. "Financial records showing Earth Command's payments to mercenary groups for false flag operations." "And the personal files?" Jakob asked. "Those are in the final transmission burst." She looked at him with something that might have been regret. "Our entire relationship, archived for posterity and broadcast to every Zephyrian ship in range. Well, at least if we die horribly in the next 30 seconds, future historians will know we had terrible taste in passwords." The relay's humming reached a crescendo as it prepared for the final data burst. Jakob's scanner showed weapons locked from 3 orbital platforms, their targeting lasers painting the excavation site in deadly crimson light. "Final transmission in 5 seconds, Zara announced. "Jakob, if this doesn't work." "It'll work." He made some last-second adjustments to the power coupling, his hands steady despite the circumstances. "And if it doesn't, at least we'll have the most spectacular divorce proceeding in galactic history." "We never actually got divorced, remember?" "Right. Most spectacular marriage counseling session then." The final data burst transmitted with a pulse of energy that made the air itself shimmer. Every personal message they'd ever exchanged, every research note, every late-night conversation about quantum mechanics and the future, all of it broadcast across the system in quantum-encrypted packets that would take years to decode. For a moment, nothing happened. The orbital platforms maintained their targeting lock, their weapon systems charged and ready. Jakob held his breath, waiting for the inevitable. Then his scanner detected something unexpected. The weapon's lock was dissolving. One by one, the orbital platforms stood down, their automated systems apparently satisfied that the transmission had been routine data traffic after all. It worked, he breathed. The bypass actually worked. Zara stared at her scanner in disbelief. The transmission is complete. All data successfully broadcast to 47 Zephyrian vessels across 8 star systems. And we're not dead. Remarkably, no. Jakob's communicator erupted with excited chatter as settlements across the moon reported receiving data packets containing evidence of Earth Command's war crimes. Within hours, the information would spread across the colonial networks and beyond. So, he said, settling back against a pile of excavated rock, what happens now? Now my people have proof of their innocence. Earth Command has some very awkward questions to answer, and we're both probably going to spend the rest of our lives as the galaxy's most wanted fugitives. Zara moved to sit beside him, her tactical armor clattering against the rocks. Any regrets? Jakob considered the question seriously. 3 hours ago, his biggest concern had been a malfunctioning water pump. Now he was a wanted traitor who just helped expose one of the largest military cover-ups in recent history. Just one, he said finally. What's that? I never did get around to fixing that atmospheric processor. It's probably completely broken by now. Zara laughed. The real laugh he remembered from their marriage, not the careful diplomatic chuckle she'd worn as a military commander. You know, most people in our situation would be worried about arrest warrants and execution orders. I've always been detail-oriented. He looked at her, noting how the morning light made her pointed ears translucent. Besides, if we're going to be fugitives together, someone has to worry about the practical stuff. Such as, well, for starters, we'll need new identities, transportation off this moon, and a place to hide while both our governments try to kill us. He paused. Also, we should probably discuss whether this whole, still technically married, thing is something we want to pursue or just a legal inconvenience. What do you think? Jakob looked at the woman who'd turned his quiet life upside down, who'd risked everything to expose the truth, who still made his heart skip beats even when she was essentially holding him hostage. I think, he said slowly, that being married to you is the most terrifying, exhilarating, completely insane decision I've ever made. And I'd like to keep making it if you'll have me. She kissed him then, soft and quick, tasting like morning air and possibilities. I love you too, you know, even if you do have